Then we hear about shape shifting with the reptilian, Luciferian controllers of the world. So, can shape shifting lead to a dimensional shift? For example, from a lower life level to a higher life level. Can this shape shifting achieve this result? Then?
Well, that's like kind of crushing your old car and making it into a new one. Okay, so shape shifting is just that. Yeah, they can shape shift into whatever they want. In other words, just like the politicians make their speeches, and they can create whatever they want, say whatever they want, but it doesn't change their agenda or their intent. You see, anyone can create a front. Shape-shifting is just a front. That's all it is. And they can, they have access, okay, like Stargate. They have access to portals. They have access to shape-shifting and certain things. They have certain abilities, okay, like technology. You have a car that all of a sudden you don't have to walk anymore. It's not the horse and buggy days. So what is shape-shifting really? It's not about higher or lower. It's exactly what it is. So you can take your new car and modify it, and you could say, yeah, I've shape-shifted it. But really, that's all they're doing. They're just able, like a magician, to create an apparition, an appearance of things. This is what the reptilians do here. They are caught shape-shifting many times, simply because it's hard for them to hold their positions all the time. It's hard for them to hold up that front. And so again, no, not really. And would the real guides appear as this or that? They do that as a demonstration. That becomes the difference, because the demonstration is very important for people to learn to recognize something, you see. And so more so many times than words. But when it comes to the shape-shifting of what the reptilians are doing, again, they're doing it to disguise who they really are and the agenda that they're creating. So that becomes the difference. So now you get a little idea here so you can define things a little better. But it's not about higher or lower. These are ideas that people have, or better or worse, etc. It's it is what it is. And again, the world has been fooled enough, and we don't need to be fooled anymore. So we see these things, and so yes, it people can think that, they can think that, okay, if I do black magic or if I get into the psychic stuff and I can do this or that, it's better. Yeah, it can be, but again, it just depends upon the intent of the individual, the true intent, not just some sound good idea that looks good. So there's many factors involved, and each person, just like Sherlock Holmes, has to figure it out, or you don't, or you just take the surface image or the front that's created. Each person decides that. So, but shape-shifting overall is, I'm just looking at what you're saying and asking. That's what the reptilians, and they're creating the illusion that they're the good guys. And so, yeah, in a way, just like in the movies, we sort out the good guys from the bad guys. That's part of it, but there's a bigger picture. And so we're giving them the opportunity too. I've written book titles on Lulu. One of them was called "They Don't Have to Be Afraid." You see, the shapeshifters and the world controllers, they're actually more afraid than the people that they have projected fear to. That's why they're doing what they're doing. That's why they're destroying the world, simply because they're afraid. They're so afraid that others will take what they've stolen. It's ridiculous, isn't it? But that's really, etc. How did the monarchy get everything they have? The queen with her so-called trillions, whatever. They stole it all, and they're afraid that someone else is going to take it from them, so they build armies, they pay people to defend them and destroy others that try to attack them. This is how all this stuff started. And it's ridiculous, but this is where it is. We deal with it, and this fear factor, etc. So you get into the shape shifting. They're shape shifting because they want to disguise themselves. They're hiding. They're afraid to present, they're afraid to stand up and be real. See, they're more afraid. See, this is what the public doesn't understand. The public has been taught to fear them, to fear the government, to fear the IRS, fear the monarchy, etc., fear the military, to fear these things when really you don't have to fear them. They project that because they know it's an illusion. They need your agreement. One person can make a difference, and that is, it's not about changing what they've done. It's about simply not agreeing to the nonsense that they've projected, because that's all it is. Because now you have the isness, which is pure, and you can stand real in that, and you don't need any of this nonsense anymore, you see? So again, but that's a huge journey. Real fast, I'm going to refer to an experience many, many years ago, before most of this took place, probably about 2007 or 8 or somewhere along there. There was this one fellow that was taking the courses, and he wanted to see, the mountain of the new man. And so he was given this experience with Rebazar and Paul on the real side. And he saw this mountain. All of a sudden, he was in the experience, and there was Rebazar and Paul, and they were standing beside this mountain. And he looked up, and it was like higher than the sky. He just looked up, and then it startled him. So he came back into his personal self, and then he said he did it again, and he went into the real side, and then was in the same experience. And the boys pointed him to this mountain. It was he couldn't see the top because it just went into the sky. And this is New Wave is, it's a big climb. It's a big journey. It's not what people think. So, and the first part is learning to recognize what's going on here, etc. And but you have this isness. Now that you know, you can start your journey. You decide your adventure. So, yes, thank you for bringing that up, Charles. It is very important, and more people are aware of it, and, like David Icke and whatever. But David Icke, you see, he's really setting people up in his own way, and that is they don't have the real cure. So once they've got this knowledge, just like astral projection, when you astral project, you're actually putting holes in your aura. And this is where the boys stop all this stuff as you come to them when you do the new you and whatever, because it's not necessary to project anywhere. And so David Icke and what he's saying as an example, or David Wilcox and the others, yeah, great, it's great knowledge to start. But if you get stuck there, you get tap line because you're opening portals because of that information, because unconsciously it starts the fear coming in once you realize, oh my God, what do we do? Oh my gosh, what do we do, etc. So they don't, and this is where we have the real cure for all, and that's why spreading this out there, letting people know, because they're getting a lot of information, but at the same time that information is set out there to control them, because they don't have the real cure. They don't have what it takes, because they don't see the invisible side of themselves, how they're tap line in their astral bodies. And so that incorporates the shape-shifting idea too, because they are physical astral, and this is where they can manipulate people unconsciously, because the astral bodies and all the bodies are tied to the unconscious part of ourselves. That's in our dreams or whatever, or in our daily life, people are constantly agreeing. So much for shape-shifting. Do we really need it? But we know the idea, and some people think, oh, this is so cool. Well, you can do it. There's shape-shifting into animals and whatever, and some people can do these things. Again, it's the intent of the individual and what's the idea here. But sometimes maybe you need a different way to escape, so it can be a good thing. It's just how you use it.
Okay, Duane, I'll come back to your comments about joining the new presentation of the Worldwide Educators group to have some temporary benefits, especially for the personal self. And some people seem to think that joining this group automatically alter their circumstances. And so when it's not happening, they become frustrated, disappointed, and develop cold feet. Well, but it seems to many of the new friends that joining the new presentation has instead unleashed some very negative consequences on them. Some complain nothing is working in their lives anymore. Those who were being a little bit fine, they are now just in dire straits, and someone to think, is it the new song that has caused a disruption in their lives, or what? So become very poor, destitute. So there's this consternation, there's this perplexity about the role of the new presentation in their lives. So I don't know what you can say about this. I was about to bring it up, but as a separate question, but you hinted at it in your answer. Yeah, thank you, Duane.
I always have fun with what Charles asks. Yes, in a way, I don't have an answer, but I do, and that is that all of the above, Charles? Do we know somebody that's going through all of that, plus hurricanes and tornadoes? Yes, we do. And so, it's kind of like when I was younger, I fasted a lot, and I went through it fine. But some people, especially as they get older, now I was young, I was in my 20s, and I did a lot of fasting, etc., because I wanted to, and I lost a lot of weight and learned a lot about the physical body. Now, when some people go through this, especially when they're older, because they've been on diets for certain type of diet, and that is the good life diet, etc., for their whole life, and maybe they're 40 or 50 or 60, and now all of a sudden, they've got all these problems, and especially with the foods today and all the additives, the chemicals and what have you, plus the air we're breathing. Now it's, they're constantly going to the doctor and taking pharmaceuticals, etc., and they still have these problems that are getting worse. And so when they find something that kind of works, that's natural, trying to find something natural, all of a sudden they're going through this transition with this. Yeah, because all the bad stuff, just like a dirty hose that you haven't turned on for years, all of a sudden, what comes out first? All the spiders, the spider webs, and whatever dust is accumulated in there. It might even take a second for the water to just burst out because there's so much stuff in there. And the same thing with what we've drug along for lifetimes. It's different with everybody. Me, it just kind of was a kind of smooth transition, because as you step up to this, the boys try to make it so. But we're in a different set of situations now than I look back at when Paul was here in the 60s. And, those were the good old days. And many people were there along with me, the older people. The younger people don't know. The younger people are growing up in this age. And this is the highfalutin hyper age where everything is full speed ahead, and it's put it in the microwave. I don't have time. I want it 10 seconds later for my meal to be done. Okay, microwaved or not, I don't care if it's radiated, just so it's done in 10 seconds. This is the microwave generation, and everything's like that. And so as people come into this, I'm not saying they're going to, but I'm just offering a view here, and that is that I'm always interested myself when people start doing the new you to see what happens. And we hear all kinds of stories. And all of a sudden, and I used to see this too when I used to share the hue, out there in the public, and I would teach classes, or I'd teach courses out there, and people would come back, and some people would say, well, the first night I did the Hue, I had all these people chasing me, and they were trying to get me, and I had to run from them. Well, as they told me their experiences like that, and there was other ones that were totally wonderful and off the chart, but, those were very common simply because I could see that, as they started to decide differently, it's kind of like, okay, you've belonged to the mafia or the mob all your life, and all of a sudden you go to the Godfather and say, look, Godfather, you know what? I want to retire from this. I want to just go live my life or whatever. And the Godfather can nod his head, whatever. But then, as the guy leaves the room, then he sends the hitmen after him, okay, because he don't want him talking. That's how it is. So in other words, you've been with a certain group, or you've been in certain situations for the longest time, and now you're deciding to get up and leave the table. Well, there's individuals that notice that, and they don't like that. So they're going to set up situations to possibly deter you from that, just to get you to decide differently, or they just eliminate you. They try to eliminate you, but realistically they can't. It's really the fear factor. We're just afraid of ourselves for the most part. But yes, and it's there's really nothing I can say about that, because again, each person has to figure it out. You see, there's a part of ourselves that knows. In other words, it knows what makes sense. This is where we're at here. See, we're not about truth or being right or this is whatever. I see it as making sense. Does it make sense to you? What I'm writing, what we're saying, what's being demonstrated, what you're seeing on the real side, does it make sense? Because this is what the world is today. Everywhere we go in this world, it's marketing ploy. Everything is marketing ploy, whether the individual notices it or not. This whole society from the cowboy and Indian days has been set up to be marketing ploy. That's the whole agenda of the United States. It's not the la-la land that people think it is. So it's like the idea, owning a house is the American dream. Well, that's marketing ploy to keep you here for as many lifetimes as they can. That's all. They get you to buy into these ideas to where you chase these ideas. It's like, oh, finally you've got your own home and whatever. And it's like everything's great. Hey, you're still paying taxes. You're still burdened. They own the land. They own the earth. But you're in your la-la land thinking whatever. But no, they just make you chase these ideas. So, what we're referring to here is exactly what it is. But again, it's making sense of it. What makes sense, Charles? And so all the individual has to do is look at what they were involved in. And I've seen people that struggle with this because in their past lives, into their present life, they were involved in witchcraft, psychic arts, etc., manipulating and dealing with others. And so, again, all of a sudden, those individuals that they've been dealing with on the real side that they weren't conscious of dealing with, now all of a sudden, they're becoming conscious of recognizing who they've been hanging around with on the real side. You see? That starts to show up. And so it's not the heavenly bliss that they're looking for. No, we each have to get through ourselves first. And this is what is not understood. This is where the so-called religious and spiritual paths, especially the spiritual paths, they really market this stuff. So they get you into a passive state of meditating and all these things, which is fine, whatever you want to do. And it does calm you down. It does give you the so-called balance and peace of mind, but it doesn't mean you're not being tap-lined because you agree with their agenda. There becomes a difference. And so, yes, all of a sudden the individual is starting to see who they've been hanging around with, and things happen. And, Paul, when he was going through this, and we all have to go through whatever it takes to get to that point to recognize something. Hey, he came to Rebazar and he said, I lost my wife, I lost my house, I lost everything. And Rebazar just laughed. He knew that Paul had to go through the process. He had to face himself and all these things he had decided. You see, even though Paul and I were to come here and do this, we still had to go through this process. We still had to go through the fog as we came into the physical sense, and then, figure it out each lifetime. You got to figure it out because we had chosen to come in here to do this for lifetimes, been prepared. And still, each time, and it's just like, a soldier getting out of boot camp. He just doesn't walk into the enemy camp and say, hands up. No, he has to go through the struggle and crawl on the ground and go through bombs and minefields, etc., whatever it is, lasers, to finally get to the enemy to capture them. And this is how it is coming into each lifetime, as we do this. So, yes, when people first start doing the new you and they have these experiences, I'll bet it scares them. I've listened. I don't have an answer. It's just that you want to keep going. And it's just like boot camp, when you're crawling under the machine gun fire, that's part of it. It's not like in the Goldie Hawn movie, Sergeant Benjamin, where she was promised to have her own condo. Yeah, it's a little more than that. And so now you're going to meet the whole of life. And this is what scares people. A lot of people know that's why they won't touch this. It's like they've got to meet themselves and they've got to see the whole of life. They got to see what's going on here through creation and eventually recognize the real universe. That's a big step. So, for most people, religion and spiritual paths, even politics and education, whatever, they're better off there. They're better off to stay asleep. But it's a choice. But we create the opportunity. So, yes, again, here's the challenge, isn't it, Charles? As people come up with these experiences, I like to prepare myself, and this is where I constantly rehearse something that try to make it fun as to what they're going through and provide a better understanding for them instead of just saying something like, well, it's your karma, or, it's the dark night of soul. That doesn't define anything. These are ideas that we went along with because we were told these things. Now we got to figure it out for ourselves. See, now it's where you got to figure it out. It's like from high school where they told you to where you go into college, you decide your course now. You decide to do your homework and get your degree. And so you decide to have a real purpose, to get there, to recognize that, to have a real purpose more than just a personal purpose. So it's a big picture, isn't it? It only gets bigger. So this becomes the challenge too. Yes, thank you for asking. So people better understand what's going on. They make the choice. Stay with their fear or get through it.